Let's start off by exploring this situation, which has been developing concerning Pavel Durov, the
Yes.
Telegram billionaire who was arrested in Paris. What can you tell me about him?
Well, at first, when I heard this, I thought I always try to give the official narrative the benefit of the doubt, and it's usually not, it usually doesn't end up that way. So at first, when I heard he was arrested, I thought it was kind of funny because, like, the Russian answer was, "That's terrible. What hypocrisy." And then Lukashenko said, "That's terrible." Or that's great. They should arrest him because he's subversive or whatever, but the hypocrisy is awful. So, depending on how you look at it, he was a good guy or a bad guy. But of course, in the West, we see Telegram as a place where you can get privacy, where it's not censored. It's a social media outlet. It's almost a very large social media outlet. That's a specific definition in the EU Digital Services Act, and it's flirting with that threshold. So he was arrested. He was, they didn't even have to charge him to hold him for 96 hours. And he was being charged with things that were happening on his site that he wasn't actually doing, like pornography or trafficking or drugs or whatever. And it reminded me, of course, of Ross Ulbricht. I don't know if you know Ross Ulbricht's story.
No,
Okay,
I'd like
so
to know. Tell us.
we can get to that. I want to talk about if we have time.
Okay.
There are a couple of other
Yeah, yeah.
people I see the parallels with. So he's in jail, and I thought, and his story is that he started kind of the Facebook of Russia. It was called VK, like V Communique or something like that, VK, in I think 2013 or 2014. And at that time, Russia asked him to suppress opposition, and he said no. So he left Russia. Some of the shareholders of VK said that he embezzled money from the company and in order to start Telegram, which he did then. And now we all, a lot of people use Telegram. And I thought, okay, I'm thinking of like, when was it that he was there, and what was the opposition? So the next day I saw an article that said Pavel Durov wooed and courted or something by Western governments. And I thought, this is an interesting development. I kind of wondered if this guy was a Western asset. And that's when I dug a little more deeply into what he was doing in Russia. Well, what he was doing was he established this around 2014, and he was providing a place for so-called Ukrainian protesters to facilitate their activities, and he was protecting their identities from the Russian government. And I'm thinking, I've been following that story since 2014. I used to have a radio show, and I did many shows on that because the U.S. government was caught red-handed, Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt, orchestrating a coup there and talking about how the way that they were ginning up the civil society, they ginned up these protests, and then there were snipers who were killing people on both sides of the protest in order to charge Yanukovych, the democratically elected president at the time, with murder. So I don't think those protesters are legit. Then I'm thinking, okay, this guy was facilitating this, and Putin was calling BS on it. So the difference between when Putin, or in this situation, he was talking about foreign subversives posing as Ukrainian protesters. When they talk about how when the West gets pissed about censorship, people like me, it's because our own government is suppressing our own legitimate objections to their undemocratic policies and procedures. So I think and then this article had said that Durov had, like 6 or 7 years ago, had lunch with Macron. He every time he comes to the US, he gets stopped by the FBI. He said that on Tucker Carlson. And I'm thinking, he's talking to the FBI when he comes here. He's just been inside of the French government for 96 hours. I'm thinking this guy's an asset, a Western asset. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for him. And I think the punchline is that when they arrested him, Telegram downloads shot through the roof. And I wonder if now that might push him into Telegram into the category of very large social media platform, which would heighten the level of compliance with that EU Digital Service Act, which Telegram already says they comply with. So maybe it's a little bit of revelation of the method. I don't know, but that's the story as it's unfolded before me in the past week.
So when you were talking about the snipers there in Ukraine, that's the 2014 Maidan affair, yeah, that you're talking about
Yes,
there.
not the Odessa one, which was even worse, but the Maidan affair. There's hidden audio that proves that has, and everyone remembers because Victoria Nuland, who was the Assistant Secretary of State at the time, said, "Fuck the EU." Sorry,
Hmm.
am I bad to say
No, no, you're
vulgarity?
fine.
Sorry.
You're fine.
So she said, "F the EU." Everybody remembers that, but of course, that's what was highlighted because what the rest of the conversation was her plotting what ended up being a successful coup against the Ukrainian democratically elected government, including naming the 3 people that she was going to put in charge there. And then later, there was a conversation, hidden audio, that Catherine Ashton, who was an EU, I think she maybe was like a head of EU, and an investigator, I think like the Estonian foreign minister, saying that when they found the protesters and the cops with bullets in them, dead ones, they were the same bullets coming from the same place.
Mm.
So obviously that whole thing was orchestrated, including killing people.
Yeah, and it seems like he had his finger in that pie too. And for anybody who wants to know more about that coup, how it got to that stage, and Newland's comments, because you were just quoting Newland there. You're allowed to get away with an F word if you're quoting Newland because that's how
Yes.
she speaks. If you do want to check that out, go to my newspace.com site and check out the non-governmental octopus, where me and Khan Disley, who's been on the show, we go through this in detail, including the rise of NGOs. Oh, there's never octopus
Yeah,
there
another
because, well,
octopus.
it's the best way to describe what's been going on. Now, you mentioned Macron. You mentioned the meetings in France. Now, it was revealed that he had met Macron for lunch in 2018, while the French president tried to get Durov to move Telegram's headquarters to Paris. So, could the arrest also not only be about the intelligence meddling, but could it also be compounded by a dose of sour grapes from the French?
The reason I don't think that, although, I mean, maybe, of course, but the year before that, France and UAE, the United Arab Emirates, joined forces for something called Purple Music, which was they hacked Durov's phone in an effort to determine if ISIS was using Telegram to organize their terrorist attacks. Now, ISIS has its roots in the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency. There's documentation of that on, I think it's Levant.com, something like that, where Michael Flynn, General Flynn, was the head of that at the time in 2012. And they said, we need, and literally said, an Islamic State on the border of Syria and Iraq. And I don't know if they had spelled out that it was so they could have an excuse to go into Syria, but that is what happened. So an idea that ISIS is something that, maybe at that level, they are allowed to operate independently, and maybe France and the UAE does want to look into them, does want to stop Telegram. I don't know, but that's a red flag to me that it's not legitimate. But what was also very interesting to me is that, of all places, France and the Emirates were teaming up before the conversation with Macron, and Telegram, if I'm not mistaken, ended up headquartered in UAE. So I feel like, and I believe that's true. We could maybe double check that, but Durov became a citizen of France and UAE and Kitts and Nevis. So that also feels like an operative kind of guy, a lot of passports. But yeah, it could have been sour grapes. I mean, I did take the story at face value from the beginning, but after I dug in, I had to change my opinion.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it as well, and that sounds like a lot of meddling. I'm very interested in France and how they are involved in this massive intelligence grey blob and their roles in it, because they do a lot of strange things. I found it very interesting that France actually banned Rumble from the country completely. I mean, that was such a big move to make, and it kind of reeks that they have no intention to see freedom of speech happen in France. And there might be a reason behind that, seeing as that 20% of its population are either from Africa or Arabic descent. And of course, they've treated those people historically terribly, and they are left to rot in the suburbs. And if you live in France, I lived in France, and I would go walk through the rougher areas of Lyon, and people would come thinking that I'm French, and so would instantly come towards me. Gangs of people would come towards me looking like I was in trouble, and then I'd speak with a British accent, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, you're British! Oh, I'm so glad," and they would be really happy that I wasn't French. So there's obviously a lot of tension in France between those communities. This next question may be the easiest to answer, but why is a platform such as Telegram so important for the establishment?
For the establishment to destroy? Like, why do they care so much?
Why do, or for either the establishment to destroy or the establishment to control?
Oh, yes. There would be a couple of reasons. One, for the control. It's funny because, and I noticed this a lot with what they say out of Russia, like they'll never say ISIS is the U.S. I don't know why they do that, because maybe it seems too conspiranoid, or maybe they like to use the same tactics. I don't know. But I did notice that Sergei Lavrov implied that it was the U.S. behind the arrest, gave orders to the French. He didn't say the U.S., but other outlets have said that I'm not going to say we, because I have absolutely no control of, nor do I consent to what our government does. But he said that they were looking for the encryption codes, that they want to get into the back doors. They want to, Telegram has a massive amount of data. People feel like they have privacy on Telegram. So that would be the most important one for them to get, because if you're going to do anything against them, then that's where you would be. Now, Telegram says they only do that foolproof encryption, one-to-one communication that is identified as such. So I don't know how much encryption there is. They also, one of the things he said to Tucker Carlson is that there are only 30 engineers, which means that, people are inferring that it can't really be that secure. Maybe that's another revelation of the method. But the last thing I'll say, and I have to go to break, is I don't know if you've ever read Technological Slavery by Ted Kaczynski. But in that, which was like it was a long time ago, I forget, many, many decades ago, he wrote this, and he said, we're coming to the time where we're actually not going to be able to mount a defense against this technological tyranny that's descending over us, because we won't be able to communicate privately. And that is why the U.S. Constitution, has a lot of safeguards, no, search and seizure and all of that, which they violate night and day, because that privacy is essential to asserting your rights as a free citizen.
Totally correct. The digital panopticon is being built around us, and it is right at the late stages of development. And you're right, we do need to go to a break. The one and only Monica Perez. Go to monicaperezshow.com. And it's just, I've always loved talking with you, Monica. We've had many conversations now. We see eye to eye on so many things. And what you do is you excite me, because you bring these ideas to me, and you bring it from a completely fresh perspective with a little bit of extra research here and there. And I get to know a lot more. Now, I don't know how much you know about this guy, because I looked into him just a little bit. But what about this Christian Angermayer? What can you tell us about him?
Well, I coined this term, created person. And there are a lot of people who I think were created people, often tapped as teenagers, maybe because of a family connection, or in the case of Mark Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, the guy who did Quora, Lady Gaga, they were all involved in something called the Center for Talented Youth at Johns Hopkins, where they identified hyper-intelligent kids and they studied them. They didn't cultivate them, they studied them. Those guys were all in those programs. And I feel like the powers that be do tap people and create persona around them, give them jobs, get them money, and then they have a role. And I think Elon Musk is one of those people. Peter
Oh
Thiel.
my
Peter Thiel is
Lord,
a
Monica
philosophy major.
Perez, you're causing my mind to go crazy right now. That's what I'm talking about. This is why I love having you on, because I've been looking deep into the media landscape, and someone who went to one of these sort of courses at Johns Hopkins was Mencius Moba, Curtis Yarvin, who created the term red pill, and has been and when I started to write an article about him, I discovered the platform I was writing for was leaking the stuff I was researching to his people. So and I was just like, that was mind blowing. I caused a really big rift in the relationship I had. Go on, keep talking, because you're blowing my
Yeah.
mind right now. Peter
Yeah.
Thiel, you said.
Yeah, those guys. So I think they are. And one time, a long time ago, I looked into maybe the top 10 US big tech guys, and 9 out of 10 of them had some, I could find a CIA connection or military intelligence or whatever. The only one I couldn't was Steve Jobs. And I later found that his biological father was a CIA agent in Syria, like a CIA operative in Syria. So I don't think he had a relationship with him. Could it be coincidence? Maybe, but that was the only one who didn't have that connection. So I tend to, identify, like I snap to that because I see the pattern. So with Pavel Durov, one of the reasons I thought he was a created person is that in the article, Wall Street Journal article, is he cultivates an image as being an iconoclast. And a real business guy who juggles so much, like this is why I'm suspicious of Elon Musk and stuff. He runs like 5 of the biggest companies in the world and still manages to tweet night and day, obnoxious things, sometimes illegal stuff, no repercussions. And, they distract you, the smoke and mirrors, with the imagery. It also builds confidence. And when why do they do an image? They do it for some kind of trust. And then I always think con man, that's confidence. That's a con man. So when I saw this article about an article recently about Christian Angermeyer in the Wall Street Journal, I thought, why are they writing about this guy? He makes his money. He's a German guy. He makes his money brokering deals, but every single deal they mentioned was like a colossal failure. Like maybe he did a lot of deals that were good, but a lot of these deals were real money losers, yet he continued to work for the same clients. Tether is his big client, and Tether is the stable coin that it's getting so big so fast that it puts all its money in treasuries because it's has to be stable. Like it shouldn't have the way I interpret it, it's tied to the dollar. It takes out that volatility in Bitcoin that makes it difficult as a medium of exchange. Maybe this kind of thing is a prototype for the CBDC. I don't know. But Tether has a lot of money, and they take the interest that they earn off of those treasuries, which keeps going up all the time as they continue to invest in rising rates, takes those money from the treasuries and invests it to make more money. And they seem to invest a lot of it through this guy, Christian Angermeyer, and they have lost a lot of money that way. One thing they bought was something called, and I read about this phenomenon out of Australia, actually, in a Wall Street Journal article yesterday about a totally different thing. But what it is they're repurposing Bitcoin servers and operations for AI. And so Tether keeps just pouring money into Northern Data, which is a German company, even though it keeps losing money. Every time they pour money into it, this guy gets 5%. So it's a way to get him some money. They bought a couple of crypto companies for that server purpose, one of whom was owned by a guy and a person in Angermeyer's family office. So that's another thing that I think of as created person, is when they're getting money in some way that doesn't make sense. Like George Soros front ran the pound. It's like, well, if anyone was tipping him off, he could easily make money that way. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, it's like government connected stuff a lot of times, or subsidized research, whatever. So when I saw this And another thing that they're investing in is BlackRock Neurotech, another big money loser they keep spending money on, which is one of those things that puts implants like Neuralink. And my thinking is that this guy is being so there was no like punchline in the Wall Street Journal article. And I'm thinking this guy is someone to keep an eye on. They're giving us an image of this person and the first, when he started making money, he had a partner by the name of Michael Novogratz. And I thought, I don't know this guy, but again, he was a crypto guy, lost a ton of money out of the gate, but he's, made it all back, super billionaire. And I thought, well, that's, I don't know. But then I saw this one little line that he's a member of this Kappa Beta Phi, which is a society, secret society. There's one chapter, it's on Wall Street. It's an inversion of Phi Beta Kappa, which is an honor society from college. And it's portrayed as a parody, but they meet once a year. And some of the members include Michael Bloomberg, John Corzine. If your listeners know who John Corzine is, he was the head of Goldman Sachs. He was the governor of New Jersey, a senator from New Jersey, and got away with absolute larceny at MF Global. You can look that up. Larry Fink, people know, Wilbur Ross, Robert Rubin, Warren Stevens of the Stevens Bank, which is covered in this original, The Octopus, about the death of Danny Casolaro. And when people meet in person, like I was saying with Pavel, if they're meeting in person, that I think is where they can cook stuff up that can't be seen. So I feel like this guy is going to be the face of something going forward, maybe in Europe, but maybe globally.
Yeah, and I do think that people should be careful investing in things like Tether, check things like that beforehand, because you may just be investing in something which is a intelligence cutout project or a way to look for. And the one name you mentioned, Corazon.
John Corzine.
Yeah, Corzine. He come up in multiple investigations when I was going through the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. But I was unable to fully, the amount of dirt on that guy was amazing, but it was in the end not linked with what I was actually investigating. So I went on to other things. Monica Perez, you just came on and blew my mind. Thank you for doing that. I really do appreciate it. And you're always welcome back here to talk to me anytime. I completely love it. Thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.